Hi, everybody. I'm Pete Christensen,
I'm Coffee Brown.
and welcome to episode 42 of Don't Die Dumb. I want to start by, I suppose, explaining the Hollywood elite. That's a moniker that's been thrown on people, even though most people in acting are struggling. They're not elitists. They're not making the big money. There is a corona of multimillionaires. But because of that, I don't think most people would want to be part of the Hollywood elites because look how they die. Vic Morrow, decapitated during a remake. Really not the way you want to go. Elvis died on the toilet with his pants around his knees. I really don't want the Elvis death. If God gave me a choice, no Elvis death. Sonny Bono, skiing down a hill, skied right into a tree. It's like an episode of Wile E. Frickin' Coyote, okay? David Carradine.
Let's just kind of skim over
No,
that.
let's, yeah, we'll skip that one. Anton Yelchin, the guy who played on Star Trek as the Russian...
Chekhov.
Yeah, Chekhov. He ran himself over. How do you run yourself over? Got out of the car, went in the back. Oh, damn.
I think you'd have to ask Jerry Raymer that question.
Yeah, there you
Jeremy
go.
Raymer. By the way, I don't want to make fun of that guy. He actually got injured heroically saving his kids.
Did he really?
Yes. And he also made a pretty heroic recovery. So, I mean, there was that moment, and it seemed kind of funny for a second, but his story would make itself a great movie. And Mr. Raymer, I honor you for how you got injured and how you recovered.
Did I mention him?
No, I did.
Well, thanks for
I
throwing
started
water
it.
on that bit, okay?
Yeah,
Now,
sorry.
Natalie Wood gets drunk and falls off the boat. And the other two guys are so drunk, they can't save her.
Or did Robert Wagner murder her?
No, don't say it. I don't even believe that.
I don't either.
But once again, thanks for the blanket on the bit, okay? Steve Irwin, he's a naturalist, deals with nature, gets stabbed to death by a fish. Has that ever in the history of mankind happened to anybody else other than Captain Ahab? And even he wasn't. He drowned. Bob Crane. Another one we can get. Remember Hogan's Heroes? We can gloss over that one, you know. Matthew Perry gets high, drowns in his own hot tub. There's only 4 foot of water in a freaking hot tub. If you're going to die, Hollywood death, Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn had just got married. He's on the yacht sailing up to Vancouver, British Columbia, in his yacht, dies in his sleep.
Oh, that's a good one.
Now, if I get my choice, I'm not going to say I want the Errol Flynn death or the Sonny Bono death. It's quick, you know. But Errol Flynn, that's the one I take. Now let's get on to more serious subjects here.
Actually, I want to throw one more in there. My grandfather, on his last day, he was at a dinner in his honor, a black tuxedo, white tie kind of an affair. There were CEOs of big companies. There were a couple of ex-presidents, and there were a bunch of Hollywood elite there. And it was all in his honor. And then I think it was near New Year's Eve or on New Year's Eve. And then he told his wife he was kind of tired and he was going to go nap in the car. And when she was done, she could come get him and they'd go home. And she found him dead behind the wheel.
Wow.
Now, that is the way that I want to go.
But you want to get in that testimonial dinner just before the end, right?
Right,
Okay.
right. And if I knew it was my last night, by the way, I would totally eat the dessert.
Yes, of course. Screw the cholesterol. I'm having the cherries
That's
jubilee.
right.
Yes.
I might even smoke a cigarette or something.
Now, let's start out with a good subject, something a little bit uplifting after the nation celebrated its 250th birthday. Respecting nature and the need for nature. There seems to be an all assault on nature right now, but the respect for it, simply respect it. I was raised on a farm. I didn't love animals, I respected them. A horse is female prone. If you want to approach a horse, you bend one knee. And they see that, oh, it's not going to run at me, it's not going to attack me. When an animal sees you, it knows this, male or female, large or small, and then if you stare at it, of course, it thinks predator. But if you just have a respect for nature, I don't have anything against hunting. If you're going to eat that food that you shoot and you only take what you need, the license and the animal is not endangered. The money you pay for the license helps. In the past, it helped protect the species. Now, right now, these organizations have been stripped and gutted so that it's not helping the species as much as it did in the past. But I understand some hunters. There would be such a glut of deer in the Midwest if they didn't have hunting. I'm not going to say it's right for everybody, and I especially don't like trophy hunting. If you can't eat it, why shoot it? That makes no sense to me at all whatsoever. But nature goes much deeper than that. I often think that the reason there are so many wheat allergies now is because they spray the wheat with a chemical so that they can harvest more of it. They started this back in the 70s. Wheat is gummy, and it gums up the thrashers. And they spray it with a chemical that dries it out so they can harvest more of it. But that's about the time when all those wheat allergies started. Do you think there's any, you being in the medical field, of course I'm a certified medical assistant, but you being in the medical field, is there any truth to that? What do you think the cause of the wheat allergies are?
To the best of my knowledge, there are two things to consider. Anybody can be allergic to any protein, and there do seem to be some people who don't tolerate, who are allergic to gluten, though as far as I can tell, the number of people who are actually gluten intolerant is a teeny tiny fraction of the number who think they're gluten intolerant. Celiac sprue is something else entirely. You're actually missing the enzyme it takes to digest wheat, and if you have celiac sprue, you really cannot eat wheat at all. It's less than 1% of us, but if you have celiac sprue, you just can't have wheat. If you're allergic to one of the wheat proteins, it probably isn't gluten actually, but there are a bunch of different proteins in wheat. You could be allergic to something in rye or in corn or something. There's nothing special about wheat that makes it dangerous unless you have celiac sprue, or if you have a specific allergy, but there's nothing special about allergies. You can be allergic to almost anything.
Now, with respect to nature, I know there's people have made it controversial about climate change. And climate change, by the way, used to be called global warming. It was one of the Bushes that called it climate change. And there was 186 scientists from 198 countries that did, on an average, 30 years of study. Now, here's the interesting thing. It's independent study. They weren't coalition with each other. It was independent study, and they all came up with the same thing. When people tell me they're climate deniers, I say, well, are you a scientist? Are you a climatologist? Are you even a meteorologist? Why wouldn't you believe the people that spend their life doing this and will ruin their career and their life if this was a hoax? And even if you don't believe it, clean air, clean water, don't you want that?
What if we clean up the air and we clean up the water and we preserve the forests? We have beautiful swaths of nature and we stabilize everything, and it was all for nothing.
It wouldn't be for nothing, would it?
Right? Look, not everything that people disagree with is controversial. Whatever you're an expert in, there's some tiny fraction of the people in your field who believe things that you know darn well are wrong, or at least believe things that you know that almost all of the experts in your field that you are an expert in would say, no, that's wrong. In the case of climate change, about 97% of the world's climatologists, and they come to this from different countries with different political systems, different perspectives, different agendas, about 97% of them are terrified of climate. That is not controversial. You can find 3% wackos in any frickin' field you want. The Pope just had to communicate a splinter group of Catholics because they weren't honoring any of the evolution of the Catholic Church since the Second Vatican Council. And so they were ordaining bishops and stuff without papal approval. Now, whatever you think of the Catholic structure and so forth, the point is, if you're a Catholic, this is a group of, at most, maybe 100,000 people, a tiny, tiny percentage of Catholics in the world. That doesn't make their position controversial. It makes it fringe, okay? And if you're on the fringe, the burden of proof is usually on you. So the notion that climate change is controversial is, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh yeah, stupid and wrong. It is just wrong. There's just way too many facts. You look at graphs of temperature and stuff. The other most common objection I hear is, well, the Earth's climate has changed before. Yes, it has. It's been hotter than it is now before. But there were two big differences. One is, it happened 1,000 times more slowly. If you stop your car, you drive your car on the freeway at 70 miles an hour and you bring it down to 0 so you can park it, but you do it gradually and it doesn't hurt at all. If you bring your car from 70 miles an hour to 0 by hitting a wall, you will die. The speed makes a difference, and climate change is happening now 1,000 times faster than it has ever happened in prehistory. The other thing is, even when that climate change was gradual, it led to mass extinctions, and we will be among those that get extincted if the temperature keeps rising. So climate change is a fact. I'm sorry, but if you don't know that, you don't know what the word fact means.
Well, now,
your goddamn opinion means nothing if you can't read a thermometer.
Now, wait a minute. Let's find some middle ground.
The middle ground is, don't be stupid, don't die dumb. Look at facts. There is science out there. Look at the shrinking ice caps.
If you're among all these people that are climate deniers, you can still tell them, you can still say, I want to preserve clean air and clean water and forests for my children and grandchildren. I don't want them to curse me later.
Let me show you my impression of a climate denier.
I get that.
That's the only way you can be one.
But they need a way out. They need to find a way where they're not embarrassed to admit they were wrong.
Grow up. Be a better person. Actually grow up and be smarter. If you don't want to look dumb, stop saying dumb shit.
Let me take the middle road here. Now, what I'm saying is, if you don't want to admit there's climate change, you can still respect nature. You can still say, I don't want all these animals to go extinct. There are only 2,000 polar bears left in the world. You want these things in nature for future generations to see and to learn from. Do you know that bears have, and here's why this is important, bears have an anal plug. They rejuvenate all their waste into their body. You know, if we can figure out how they do that, diabetics are cured. This could help people. You know, there's so much we can learn from nature. We've barely scratched the surface. Okay, I'm going to move on because
I'm going to throw another
you're
fact
not polite.
at you. This is a fact. It is just a simple mathematical fact. Populations can increase infinitely, but the Earth is not infinite. Therefore, population cannot increase forever. At some point, it will collapse. How do we know if we're nearing that point? When the Earth cannot restore, for example, the ocean temperature or the ocean pH, when we can see trash from space, when forests cannot replenish fast enough to keep up with carbon dioxide, then the population is bigger than is sustainable. The word sustainable is not a political word. It's an actual fact of the world. If no flies died and each fly lived for 3 days, they all reproduce at the rate flies normally do, in 3 months would be 3 feet deep in flies, is one of the mathematical stories I've read and not vetted myself. I didn't do those calculations. The point being that infinite population growth cannot occur. It just mathematically cannot occur. You can ignore that fact. You can just breed like crazy, like Elon Musk and J.D. Vance want you to. But if you do, you bring about a collapse that we will not survive. And we already know we're past that threshold. We have to pull back, not push forward on population numbers. There might have been a time when we benefited from there being more people, but the fact that it made sense at one point in the past doesn't mean that it makes sense now. There was a time when the best knife you could get would have been a bronze knife, but steel knives are way better.
Now, my theory has always been that overpopulation is the basics for all of our problems. Number one, too many people, not enough jobs, people turn to crime. Too many people, not enough resources, people start to starve. But I keep hearing and reading that we won't have a workforce because not enough people are having children.
That's actually a problem that's one place where well, first of all, there's not a problem with not having enough children. We are already at an unsustainable point in population. We're just objectively, by the fact that the earth is not healing as fast as we're depleting it, we are already past the point of sustainability. We only have, at most, this century to solve this problem, or there's going to be a collapse that could easily wipe out our species and at least will wipe out all of our civilizations. That is just, we can't get around it. Technology isn't going to save us from that. But what if birth rates keep falling? Is it a disaster? I'm reading a bunch of articles about, oh my God, birth rates are dropping. We're all going to become extinct. So I actually did some math on that. Now, the first time I did some math using artificial intelligence, it was about 100 centuries. The last time I did it, it got more conservative. It said we only have about 5 to 10 centuries before we would be endangered. Not extinct yet, but endangered. I started with a number of 8 billion, and the number at which a species of our size would be considered endangered is 10,000. Now, that number is too low, but that's the number we're currently using for other species that weigh about as much as us, so that's the number I applied to us. If every single woman of childbearing age had only one child in her lifetime, but lifespans are the same as they are now. So those were my mathematical beginning points. 8 billion people to start with. Every potential couple, which basically means every woman of childbearing age, has one child in her lifetime, and the average lifespan remains 75. At that rate, to get down to 10,000 people would take more than 6 centuries. But to get down to 10,000 people because of collapse, because of systemic collapse, that will occur by the end of this century or early in the 22nd century.
People will say to me, they'll say, why should I care what happens after I die?
Well,
I'm not going to be around to see that anyhow.
There's two answers to that. If you don't care about the future, then why are you constantly kvetching about how much you want to change America? You're only going to live a little bit longer anyway. But if your point is that children are important, and I think they are, by the way, I value children, I would argue, quite a lot more than J.D. Vance does, because I want every one of them to have adequate nutrition and education and health care. But I also want them to have a world they can live in. I don't want to eat everything up now and leave them just the bones. And so I would argue that I care a lot more about children than the so-called pro-lifers, and certainly way more than the pro-natalists do.
Now, there was a movement for a long time, ZPG, Zero Population Growth. And people will say, well, why should we do it when other nations aren't? And when we run out of a workforce, aren't we going to need immigrants to help us work? This hatred against immigrants, I really don't like. They wanted to put a mosque in an area with nothing but a gas station that went out of business in. And mosques are beautiful. And people got up at a city council meeting in Albuquerque and said the most vile, hateful things. And I guarantee you none of them read the Quran. I have read it. I've read the Bible all the way through twice. I've read the Quran all the way through. And they mistake Sharia law for Muslim law, and it's not. But I'm tired of the hatred. That brings us to our next subject. On America's 250th birthday, we had white supremacists and white nationalists You can show them.
This is the face of Trump's America. These are white nationalists who showed up on the National Mall on our 250th anniversary. That's Trump's America.
When people tell me how good ICE is, ICE belongs on the border and only at the border. Masked gunmen who can enter your house without a warrant. People say, "Are you proud of America?" I'm proud of America. I'm not proud of this administration.
I actually love this country. You might not think that. I love America, and I am very proud of America. Moreover, I think there's a role for propaganda. I think nations should promote pride in themselves and in their own accomplishments. But I am so proud of America that I don't need to lie about it to find good things. We're the only country in history that was ever founded on rational reason, on reason as its beginning point. We brought constitutional democracy to the world, and we didn't get it right on the first pass, but we grew it up. It is true that the first version of the Constitution only made white male landowners citizens. But the reason that is not true now is that we learned from those mistakes and we grew. And what happened as we became more inclusive, as women got educated, as women entered the workforce, as African Americans were protected in entering the workforce? By the way, the African Americans built the early economy of this country, even if it was against their will, and the Chinese were brought over in the 1860s for mining work and
The railroad.
and for railroads. They were hired. They were immigrant workers who were offered contracts to come here and work for wages, but when they got here, they got treated as slaves. Why would we exclude some of the people who built the infrastructure and the wealth of this nation from participating? But we did. And when we did, we were all, including white males, poorer. Because it turns out, and Adam Smith said this quite directly, that the more full the participation is in the economy, the better off each individual in that economy is. The fact is that white males did better under Barack Obama's Inclusive America than they did under George Washington's white male America.
Now, liberals and Democrats are being painted as people that hate America. They don't like America.
I love America.
But I feel that what they're doing is pointing out what's wrong with America so we don't make that mistake again. Johnny Waxhaw, the most decorated soldier in all of Vietnam. They took his name. Haig had his name, his medals, everything taken out of the public record because he's a Native American. Why are we, and now the Trump administration just won a lawsuit to take away all the mentions of slavery in the story of George Washington. Why are we hiding what we are? If I got a sore throat, I'm not going to lie about it. It's there. We can't fix it if we make our mistakes again. That's what I think Democrats are doing. They're pointing out our mistakes so we don't do them again.
Do you have a car? If you do, does it have warning lights on it? If it does, do you ignore the change oil light? Do you ignore the flat tire light? Do you ignore the gauge that says you're almost out of gasoline? Because if you do those things, you're not going to have a car for very much longer. Liberals are the ones who say, look at the warning light. There is a problem. We should fix it. They're not saying they hate America. They want America to thrive. I want America to thrive and to continue. I want America to continue to lead the world in science, technology, and democracy. But to do that, we can't ignore the indicator lights. And when people show up wearing masks and dark glasses and white nationalist insignia on the National Mall, that is a pretty bright strobing indicator light. And if we don't react to it, we're going to regret it. We don't need to lie about our past. This country was founded on genocide and slavery, but it also gave the world more democracy and freedom than it would have had we never existed. So we need to fix the problems, and we need to emphasize the things that we're contributing to the world and to the future. What does it mean to call ourselves moral if we don't even take care of each other?
Now, it seems to me, just my opinion, that we're trying to gloss over a history in the past and this whole idea that, and I don't like Republicans and libtards. I don't like the word tard. I have mentally challenged friends, and it hurts them. It makes them feel terrible. Why do you? I know that it's popular to say, well, they're snowflakes. If you don't want to say mean things.
Yeah, nobody
about
gets their
people.
feelings hurt faster than maggots, by the way. And we get a lot of mail from people who go, how dare you criticize us? Well, snowflake, I don't know. How dare I?
But Republicans aren't maggots. Conservatives aren't maggots. There's a big division there.
Republicans are maggots. Conservatives are not. Republicans are not conservative. Conservatives would not start wars all over the world. Conservatives would not reverse the amendments that have been made to the Constitution. Conservatives would not destabilize our political systems, and conservatives would not ignore the norms they worked so hard to establish. There is nothing faintly conservative about Republicans. We need conservatives. I personally am not anti-conservative. We absolutely need them as a counterbalance. But Republicans will destroy America where Hitler and the Confederates failed.
Now, the current president made $1.2 billion his first year as president. People always talk about law and order. Couldn't we take that money and solve the thousands and thousands of rape cases that are yet unsolved at police stations across the country? Couldn't we? They cut 192 million from child cancer research, yet we're 27 trillion in debt. Where'd the money go?
So the grifter in chief has been creating tax cuts for his billionaire cronies. That's raised the deficit. He has started wars without any income stream. That's raised the deficit. He's created this fiction that somehow tariffs, which are paid for by Americans, not the other countries, are going to replace taxes. Tariffs have created inflation for all Americans, but the total amount of money they bring in is a drop in the bucket compared to the taxes that have been waived for the super wealthy. So you can't, and of course he's funded his private police force, a bunch of stormtroopers wearing masks, which he calls ICE. They don't do what ICE used to do. I feel sorry for ICE agents that were in place before Trump, because whether or not you liked what ICE did, it was a professional organization that was acting within the law. But now those guys are submerged in a sea of stormtroopers who answer only to Trump. In fact, Trump has subverted the Constitution by forcing people in the FBI and the administration and in ICE to swear allegiance to him rather than to the Constitution. He doesn't even seem to understand that when he took the oath of office, what he swore to protect was not Trump, but the Constitution. In fact, Republicans in general think the primary job of the president is to protect the American people. It is not. Read the Constitution. The oath of office is right in there, and it says that the president's job is to protect the Constitution. And by the way, the Constitution includes the amendments. The amendments are the Constitution. They're not something peripheral. The preamble is the Constitution. It's the first part of the Constitution. It tells you what the government was established for. If you're going to go around waving a flag, maybe read the documents it's based on.
Okay, we got a little political on you this time.
A
We
little.
weren't going to do that. Next time we won't. Next time will be non-political, but hopefully educational. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the show. And remember, I'm Pete Christensen.
I'm Coffee Brown.
Don't die dumb.
I might have got a little heated there.
All right.